Sitting with Superintendent Dorsey Hopson. Thank you for sitting with the Tri-State Defender today. I have a question that I always like to ask educators, especially high-level ones, and it's kind of a philosophical question, and then we can get a little bit more into, the specifics relative to Shelby County schools. But philosophically, I always imagine that the current educational model that we have really throughout the country is based on agriculture, on how things were 100 years ago. We open the schools and close them based on, when the crops are supposed to come in. And, of course, our society and culture has shifted dramatically in that time, but our education system hasn't. So a question I like to ask educators is, let's imagine you could take a stick of dynamite to the whole educational model, and you're left with nothing but open a blank slate to start with. Everything's on the table, including, when the school year starts, how long the school days are, whether or not grade is determined by age or by, how you achieve. Everything's on the table. If you were constructing a school educational model from the ground up, what types of things would you want to shift if everything was wide open? And that's a big question, I know.
Yeah,
but
that's a great question. I think that a couple of things come to mind. I mean, obviously you're correct in that, this kind of during the school year and then out during the summer is really a direct result of, the way things were probably 100 years ago. So obviously I think that with respect to the day or the time, and we should be looking at some type of year-round school model. It's undeniable that, when you make big strides with kids, particularly kids who are far behind, and you get more than a year or two of growth during a year, then they go home or go out for the summer. There's a big, learning drop that happens in the summer. Then you come back in the school. The school year, you have to, reteach them what they've forgotten. So that doesn't work. I also think that, I'd love to rethink the way that we deliver instruction, particularly as you think about technology. We have, some serious rock star teachers in Shelby County. And let me just take a step back. We have, really thousands of good teachers here. But then, like any other profession, you have just some absolute superstars. It'd be great if we could figure out a way through technology to get, as many kids, particularly kids who are far behind, in front of the true rock stars. And I think that, using technology is a way to do that. And I just think that, when we think about the different learning styles that our kids have, particularly as you're thinking about, some of our black and brown boys, we need to figure out a class structure model that allows them, A, to stay engaged, and then B, to learn at their own pace. So obviously the school day or the school year and the technology piece. But then I also think that just trying to think this question through, like, I wish there was a way that we could also deliver some educational tenets in so many of our homes. We've got, I often cite the statistic that we've got 40,000 kids in the Shelby County schools who live in households where the income is less than $10,000 a year. And so when you have that extreme poverty, it causes lack of support in the home oftentimes. So if there was a way where we could, in many instances, help to educate parents and families and then provide more support in the homes so that our students don't come to us so far behind or don't suffer so many distractions when they get home, then that ultimately would lead to better results, in the classroom. So that's, those would be three areas that I'd like to just really spend some time trying to tease out and say if we could get these three strategies together, I think that would go a long way towards reshaping the way we deliver education.
One of the things you mentioned, and it took me back to my college days when I first read Countering the Conspiracies to Destroy Black Boys by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. And he made the analogy, and I assume it was true in the 70s. I felt like it was true when I was in college, and it may still be true now, that by the assertion is by the third grade, or by about 8 years old, there's a shift that happens when it comes to black boys. Is that still present? Is it, in your years of education, has it improved at all? Has it taken a step back?
Well, I think there's, certainly different learning styles, and, oftentimes what we see is that, there'll be young men or young boys, first, second, third grade, and then they're, quote unquote, acting out or causing disciplinary problems, where when you dig deeper, they're just not being challenged, or they need to be challenged in a different way. I use my son, for example, at the beginning of the school year, there were some challenges around him, sitting tight and paying attention, but through the great work with the teacher, who's extraordinary, we identified that what he was doing was, he was finishing his work so quickly that, he needed more work or a different kind of work, and not just your regular, read this book, go over this worksheet, but work that's going to keep him engaged. And so I do think that, not just here, but all over the country, all too often, young black boys are over-identified as special needs kids or behavioral disorders, where the reality is they just need a different kind of support. And then once you start labeling kids, and, segregating them in different fashions, then, you put them on a course to not be as successful as they could be.
Presumably one of the reasons that, the ASD stepped in was to help counter some of these, challenges, in low-performing schools. And I know the school board has kind of asked you to step in and say, don't let them take over any more schools. Where does that stand now, and what actually can you do in that regard?
Well, I think the ASD has been a interesting creation. I think that as an initial matter, I think in as much as the ASD has caused us to be more focused on priority schools and support schools in a better way, it's been a useful creation. We have far too many chronically underperforming schools, and all of them are in poor black and brown neighborhoods, and those schools got that way in part because the school district, the city, the county, nobody was investing in those communities. So when the ASD was created and we were given an opportunity to also turn around schools, it gave us an opportunity to invest in those communities, but also we know that we have to focus on those schools, and it's created a sense of urgency that just wasn't there before. You go out to schools and you can tell that teachers are, particularly in priority schools, are teaching like their hair's on fire. And when you talk to teachers, what they say is, we don't want to be on a list. So in as much as the ASD, led to the sense of urgency and birthed the I-Zone, as it were, I think that's been good for low-performing schools. I think the challenge with the ASD is that there wasn't a lot of community buy-in on the front end. And I'd meet with former Superintendent Barbic years ago, and different supporters of the ASD, and my position was always, what I hear out there in the community is people feel like this work is being done to them, not for them. So in theory, the people who could benefit the most from significant structural changes in the way education is delivered, they weren't buying it because nobody really engaged them on the front end. And one of the things I've learned being in this role, when you have a lot of poverty and a lot of things that come with poverty, a lot of people don't know how to do anything but fight. So once you create a scenario where you feel like something's being done to you and something's being taken away from you, and you're constantly being labeled as a failure, it causes people to fight. And, so that's been a challenge with the ASD. In addition to the challenges around the community engagement, I think we all agree that, as a sector of schools, the ASD has not performed as well as anybody would have liked to. Now, there are some pockets of success that should be touted and highlighted. But, when you have a sense of urgency and people are already skeptical and then the results aren't there as quickly as people would like, it just causes more heartburn for the community.
Yeah, but the problems that the ASD schools or that city schools in general are facing are not, these problems didn't just pop up.
Exactly.
They've been building over decades, if not centuries, over generations. What is a realistic expectation for, quote, turning the problem around? I mean, is it realistic to expect something that's been building for 50, 60, 70, 80 years or further to be turned around in 5?
Well, let me say it like this, because I think that's a great question. I remember when I was counsel for the district, and, the mission of the I-Zone was to take schools from the bottom 5% to the top 25%. Knowing the problems and the challenges, you hear that and you say, that's aspirational, sounds good, but how do you do that? But we actually have schools that are doing that. Cherokee Elementary School comes to mind. Kids were, in a single-digit proficiency rate, and they're truly on track to go to the top 25%. I think they're in the 60th percentile plus this year. And those are kids, coming from Orange Mound who have the same challenges of poverty that, so many of our students have. So as a proof point, that it can happen. And it can happen in a relatively short period of time if you have the right school leader, if that school leader has high expectations, if that school leader is able to pick his or her team of great teachers, and we support the school in the right way. So it's possible, but the challenge becomes, having enough talent to replicate that, throughout the city and throughout the country. Because I think that what I've learned is even more so than money, it's just about the talent. We have many instances even here where some of our most successful I-Zone schools, we pull them from, a non-I-Zone school. They bring great teachers with them, and then they lift the priority school, but then the school they leave from, if they don't have the support, takes a step back. So, I guess in a roundabout way to answer your question, I think it is realistic to say you can turn around a school in 5 years, if you have the human capital and then the financial support to do it. But it's tough. I think that's the challenge. Even with some of our, colleagues in the ASD, their model has been to bring in talent from around the country, which is in theory a good model because you bring additional people here. You're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. But they haven't necessarily been able to connect with kids as quickly as they would have liked. So until we kind of solve that talent problem, and then obviously the money, it's going to continue to be difficult.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that the school district faces that nobody's talking about?
That nobody's talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I would say the talent. Because, and it's not, like, the reality is that...
and by talent, you mean having really talented, gifted teachers in the classroom.
We have, I want to be clear because I don't want to, so we have so many talented teachers, but it's a particular skill set to go in these priority schools.
Mm-hmm.
I hear Dr. Griffin often use the analogy, everybody can't work, in the ER.
Right.
So
even if they're doctors.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You have to be made up in such a way where you can quickly respond to traumatic situations. You think about an ER here, somebody shows up, badly mangled with blood and guts hanging out. everybody's not equipped to be able to handle that.
And it has nothing to do with their training, their education. It has to do with
the makeup.
Yeah.
And so when you enter a school and only 6% of the kids are proficient, which means 94% of the kids are not, proficient, that to me is analogous to, a trauma center.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to have people who want to go in and, address those needs in very intense, very high stakes, very stressful environments.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's not up for that. And what we see is that, you can be an outstanding teacher, at a high-performing school. You can be an outstanding teacher at a middle-tier school, but you take that same teacher and you drop them into the middle of, kids who are 4 years behind, kids with severe disabilities and behavioral issues. If you're not programmed or wired in such a way that this is your life's passion, then it's going to be difficult. And so, just figuring out a way to develop, a cadre of folks who are specially or specifically equipped to go into the ER. Nobody's talking about that. If people say, eyes on the page, some more money, give you a bonus. It's not even about the money. I mean, the money is supportive, but when you talk to different people in iZone, we had a group of superintendents come here back in December, a part of this network. And so I asked them to spend a day with our iZone team and really do a critical friends visit, give me feedback on it. And they just talked about how, the iZone has almost developed, a cult-like following. Everybody's singing from the same sheet of music. Everybody's focused on the same goals. Mm-hmm. Everybody's talking the same lingo. And, that's what you have to have. Now I worry about, too, just like any ER doctor, we kind of have this first wave of iZone teachers and principals have been here for, 4 years or so. At some point, the emergency room burns you out.
Right.
You can't do that work forever. So as we have developed this first set of leaders and teachers, I think one thing that people aren't talking about. So what's next? Because we still have, I got the list of the bottom 10% schools here in Memphis, mm-hmm. and it's heartbreaking. I mean, we probably have 80 schools, on the bottom 10% in the whole state. And so, when the list is running, and that means there are probably another 30 schools or so that need some treatment. And if we're struggling, with the talent to address the schools we have now, what's going to happen when the next wave comes on? Mm-hmm. And nobody's, just the iZone ASD debate and all that, the money, we talk about that, but just the human capital necessary to sustain this work, keeps me up at night.
Is it attracting the talent is a challenge? Is a big challenge, and is it the pay for that type of talent that you get? Is it that talented teachers want to teach in school districts that aren't struggling so much? So, and even if they're talented there, it ain't the ER. You follow what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's a combination of things. I think first of all, you're in an environment where you have a national teacher shortage, mm-hmm. because teachers, understandably so, I think for the last few years have felt under attack. And so, I was with the principal yesterday, and she was talking about when she used to teach and how things were so different. So now if you're a teacher, the narrative has been, right or wrong, the narrative has been, so now I come to the classroom, I'm not really teaching, I'm worried about the test all the time. I'm going through all these evaluations. I have to deal with all these other issues. And I do it for a salary that's, decent but not extraordinary. So you've got, just people in general not going to the teaching profession. And then you have, again, if I'm going to go into the teaching profession and I'm going to make, X amount, why would I want to, make this amount of money to go into the ER when I can do it, being in a general practice.
Right.
And so there's just no, one of the things that the iZone is, we obviously incentivize teachers with money to come. But I think it's just an overall feeling of teachers not feeling appreciated, and then the return on the investment for working in priority schools, not just here but throughout the country, may not you may not seem to get a good return on your investment unless that's your passion.
I asked this question of interim police director Rawlings when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, because when you have somebody in a position like his and like yours, it's the guy, the buck stops here at his desk, then there can be a tendency to wave your finger and be like, what are you doing to fix our problems? Well, let's turn that question around. What would you ask of the citizens of Shelby County to help you do your job better?
I say this, and I really mean it. I mean, the first thing I'd ask citizens to do is pray for me and pray for the school district. The challenges, are real. And then the next thing I would say would be for citizens to get behind support of our number one priority, which is improving early literacy. You have the statistics are crystal clear that if you are not reading on grade level by the time you finish third grade, you're 4 times likely to drop out. You're 4 times likely to end up in jail. You're 4 times as likely to end up on public assistance than if you're not. So last year we had, I think, 2/3 of our kids not reading on grade level. So if that's the indicator, the parade of horribles happens if you're not reading on grade level. So 2/3 of our kids are just not there. So, and there are some very targeted ways that our community engagement department has put together that would allow, anybody to come down here and help out with that area. And then secondly, I would probably ask citizens of Memphis and Shelby County to not view the Shelby County schools through a jaded lens. I know that, being from Memphis, the Memphis City schools, right or wrong, seem to just be such a dumping ground or a place for so much harsh criticism, right or wrong. And I'd ask people to take a fresh look at Shelby County schools. There's always this talk about there's all this bloated administration. So I think we have less than 2% administration, which is one of the lowest central office percentages in the country. We went through the merger, we were forced to do it. We have tried to be very efficient and done everything that we possibly could do to be efficient. And we've cut about $200 million over the last 4 years. And the remarkable thing to me is despite those cuts and those efficiencies, we've shown positive student achievement over the last 4 years. We've been a level 5 district in terms of growth for the last 4 years. And then last year we made improvement in 9 of 10 tested areas in the TCAP. We're really having some significant, and the iZone obviously is a national turnaround model. So, I think if people are objective and are supportive of the efforts here, it may soften their hearts and motivate them to be more supportive of these kids. Because at the end of the day, I tell people all the time, Shelby County Schools cannot do this by itself. I was with a group of pastors yesterday. We need the entire community, whether it's the faith-based community, whether it's the business leaders, whether it's the civic leaders. Everybody has. That's the only way we're going to be successful. Because when you're talking about this extreme poverty, kids show up to school. They can't see, they can't hear. Nobody's treated that stuff. They're hungry. They've been dealing with traumatic stuff at night, the night before. So all those things, they don't really get the social and emotional support that they really need. And the school system is not equipped to deal with all that stuff. So the whole, I wish there could be a groundswell of support from all the citizens around the wraparound services and the social and emotional support that our kids need to be successful. Because at the end of the day, as these kids go, so goes Memphis. You look at the high murder rate we have this year, you look at the high unemployment, and all these things that people get frustrated by or fearful of can almost all be addressed, if kids get a great education. To me, it's the great equalizer. You can't choose your circumstances in life or where you're born, but you choose to use an education system to turn your life chances around, or your life circumstances around. And you think about, so we've got our strategic plan 80, 90, 100, destination 2025. If we're successful at that, you would create an additional 50,000 people who have some type of post-secondary degree or certificate, and that's about a $2 billion, economic development plan. And if somebody were to say, Microsoft is thinking about coming to Memphis and Shelby County, every elected official would do whatever they had to do to get that company here, because they know this is going to generate revenue for our city. Well, similarly, if we could make some small investments in some targeted ways and significantly improve the achievement of our students, that have a positive economic impact on the city as well.
Is there anything I hadn't asked you that was just on your mind?
No, the thing that just keeps me up at night is just these budget challenges that we have. So we started off this year about $72 million in the hole, and we're trying to winnow that down. But at some point, you reach a number where the cuts go directly into the classroom. And even when we did the merger, we made all those cuts that year, and we were focused on saying, well, we're going to keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. So we've done it every year, but we're at a point now where, for some of this gap, there's no place else to go but the classroom. And you hate to see an organization that's done what it's supposed to do, really probably overcut in many instances, still achieve some degree of academic success, have to make cuts in the classroom, because all that's going to do is limit kids' opportunity, and then you take resources away from an already resource-strapped organization that services some of the poorest kids, in the country. And then you talk about what's happening with the ASD and charter schools and vouchers and all that. Then you just don't place the district in the position to be successful. And I think it would be a shame, if we're not allowed to continue the positive momentum that we've had over the last 3 years.
All right. I want to thank you again for talking with us, Superintendent Hopson.
Appreciate you, brother.
Might get a chance to do it again, I hope.
Just let me know.